Hey, what the bloody hell is going on in the world of cable news? First it was Don Lemon, then it was Tucker Carlson. Who's next? Rupert Murdoch? I have no idea, but it's going to be bloody interesting to watch. In a time that we've been told to understand and acknowledge that these media outlets are stronger, more powerful, more accurate than ever, there seems within these organisations to be a little bit of turmoil, and it's bubbling to the surface ever so subtly. And the one that I had the most fun learning about was the man from CNN himself, Mr. Don Lemon. Now, Don Lemon had been there for 17 years and he was a trusted news anchor, is the way that it was described. He was well respected at a time and he was well known, not always for the right reasons, but this week he had his last show and then was told, hey, Donny boy, you and I are parting ways, which left a sour taste. It's Lemon. His last name's Lemon. You have to use a sour punt at some point. So Don Lemon went to Twitter to do he's done very well for a long time, reporting news which is not entirely accurate. Lemon's statement on Twitter says, I was informed this morning by my agent that I've been terminated by CNN. I am stunned. After 17 years at CNN, I would have thought that someone in management would have had the decency to tell me directly. At no time was I ever given any indication that I would not be able to continue to do the work I loved at the network. It is clear that there are some bigger issues at play. CNN then pushed back. They said, hang on a second, mate. Don, listen, your statement's not entirely true. In fact, we're going to call it inaccurate. They said instead of being fired without warning, the company had offered an opportunity to meet with management, but instead released a statement on Twitter. Now, one of my favorite parts about this whole thing is whether you believe in karma or not, it's very sweet to watch an organization which has used anchors to peddle some very interesting takes on what they deem to be reality, now fighting for the viewer's attention to believe their version of events. Always very interesting when you have someone who's spoken directly into the camera, things which have turned out to not be entirely accurate.
The people who are not getting vaccines, who are believing the lies on the internet instead of science, it's time to start shaming them. What else? Or leave them behind.
When it comes to garnering trust from the audience that they're trying to win that trust from, it's very difficult. Flip side of that, CNN has been the fuel to people like him having a voice, so for them to come out and actually ask that we believe their version of events, I find a little bit of fun. But maybe he's right. Maybe Don has a point. There seems as though there could be some more trouble taking place. Now, at the very start point, you've got to acknowledge that the mainstream media is not the only platform where we can get news from these days. More than that, it's become more and more recognized that certain institutions like mass pharmaceuticals have become major sponsors for these organizations, which naturally, when money's involved and you're getting paid for this and not for that, you're going to start to manipulate and change stories in order to suit the people that the money is coming into your pockets from.
CNN Tonight, brought to you by Pfizer.
So as a result, questions have been asked about the legitimacy of mainstream media these days. Are we getting accurate versions of the truth, or are we getting some politicized version of what it is that these major organizations with the money are asking us to hear? Now, I mean, you just spend a little bit of time looking into that and you find out very quickly where it is that the hands that are feeding these news anchors and these media conglomerates as a whole is coming from. And it becomes very interesting about why it is that they're sharing the stories that they are. More than that, however, we now understand that podcasts have taken on. People like Joe Rogan's and Russell Brand's and shows like Breaking Points have started to show a whole other side of the news. And as a result, some of these people have started to develop more trust with the audience. So the question, or the challenge, I should say, has been thrown at mainstream media to make sure that what we're hearing is not only accurate, but not just being thrown at us based on the money that they're getting as a result. It's a very interesting landscape that we're in, to say the least. For the first time, these big media organizations haven't just had a stranglehold on what it is that you and I can hear and what it is that we believe. We've got so many other options that we can go to. It's a reason that organizations like Spotify are throwing $100 million deals to people like Joe Rogan, because they understand that the ears, the eyes, the trust that a bloke like that has with his audience is very, very strong. If they could just get him over there, it's not just a win for Joe, it's a win for Spotify. So without going too far into the Tucker Carlson story, it's going to be very interesting to watch his landscape in the coming months, because for him to leave Fox News, I personally would argue, is a bigger loss to Fox than what a bloke like Don Lemon is to CNN. It seems as though this guy is going to be a far more sought after personality from many other independent sources. Will big money be thrown at a bloke like Tucker Carlson? I think the trust and the following, at the very least, that he brings with him suggests that he could be a perfect candidate for an agency agency like Rumble or Spotify to get their hands on to bring people across to them. But that's enough of Tucker Carlson. We're not going down that rabbit hole today. We want to focus on specifically what the heck has happened with Don. Why is Don leaving CNN? He's been there 17 years. Surely he's trusted. He fits all the stereotypes that you're supposed to be a CNN anchor. What has happened, Donnie? It turns out there was a shitload that's been going on behind the scenes, and that is what I want to speak to you about now. I think the place that we've got to start is ratings. Like, for an organization like CNN, you got to make sure that the people telling the stories are bringing eyeballs to the screen, because obviously when it comes to money, like we've spoken about before, companies are going to want to pay more based on how many eyeballs it is that they're reaching with those messages, both during and in between the actual program. The problem for old Donnie Lemon is recently his ratings have slipped. Back in the Trump heyday, he was one of the most popular anchors because he had plenty of juicy stories to be able to bring to the screen. There was constantly something fresh, something new, even if it was a little bit twisted and didn't turn out to be right. It certainly got our eyes on the screen, and as a result, during those few years of Trump's presidency, he was a pretty hot anchor. It turns out for old Don that ironically, the end in Trump's presidency might have also been the end of the ratings high that he was experiencing, because all of a sudden he had nothing as juicy to talk about. The very man that they disliked with all that passion seemed to be paying some of their bills, and when he stepped away, the quality of the show stepped away. So as a start point, CNN looks at a ratings drop and says, okay, what on earth is going on here? And so you dig a little bit deeper into this and you try and navigate what is happening, because if we're going to pay this guy big money, which they were, and he's not rating highly, which he wasn't, where does that balance fit? More than that, a New York Times article recently reported that CNN's bookers, the people who actually brought guests onto the show, had discovered that a number of guests didn't actually want to appear on the air with Mr. Lemon, and research on the morning show reviewed that CNN executives found that his popularity with audiences had fallen. So with that being said, not only is this guy rubbing up the audience the wrong way, or not at least being captivating enough to keep their attention, it turns out that the bookers of the show were having trouble even getting people on the show to have a conversation with him. Now, this doesn't seem to be a massive surprise, because once you've spent a little bit of time listening to one podcast that gives someone the opportunity to speak and get an understanding of what it is they believe and ask questions and really try and get to the bottom of what it is they're trying to say, you realize the context of a CNN conversation is very different. It seems to be fueled and driven by a particular narrative that this is what we believe, and anything outside of this is a blatant lie. We don't really want to understand what you're saying. We simply want to get our point across and make you look ridiculous, because in clips, that looks really good. But over a period of time, if you're not giving people the opportunity to talk, people aren't going to want to come and speak to you. You're not going to be as popular. How on earth are you going to keep people coming back to the screen? This seems to be the ironic problem that Don Lemon had found himself in. But more than that, Chris Licht, the bloke who took over CNN quite recently, said he wanted to get back to the roots of what CNN was. CNN used to be, at one point, a relatively or more so trusted news network, and that's what Chris Licht wanted to get back to. So the question is, has he been demoted as a result of his popularity dropping, or has Chris Licht come in and started to realize that this guy does not have a place in the future of what he sees CNN being? This is a hopeful conversation, potentially, because if organizations like CNN are starting to wake up to the fact that people aren't as interested in just being lied to and getting stories based on political agenda and money, then all of a sudden journalists are being held accountable to actually make sure the news that they're reporting is accurate, or at the very least a little more accurate, which is something that some of these cable news networks, regardless of what side of the political spectrum you sit on, have struggled to do in recent years. It's going to be very interesting. But more than that, they're the only things that are going on here. Not only did the bookers find out that the guest didn't like him, the people watching didn't like him, even his bloody co-host didn't seem to like him. And in recent weeks, there'd been a number of controversial little conversations which made it seem a little more clear that perhaps the rumors going on in the background at CNN that Donnie Lemon was a little bit of a prick to a lot of people might have actually been true. But beyond just the audience not really paying attention to him anymore and guests not wanting to come on and speak to him, the very co-hosts that he was working with were startled recently when some of the claims around sexism of Don Lemon were brought to the surface when they were discussing Republican presidential candidate Nikki Haley. Don Lemon, to his two female co-hosts, read the room, Donnie, said that this woman was past her prime being at the age of 51. Now, potentially, you have some points to be able to discuss there, but that's exactly what you have to do. If you're going to make a bold claim like that, you need to be able to justify what it is you're speaking about. Are you speaking about raising children? Are you speaking about giving birth? Are you speaking about physical performance when it comes to sport? Are you speaking about looks, Donny boy? What are you speaking about? Instead, Don just said, hey, if you want to Google when's a woman at her prime, Google will tell you that it's before she hits the age of 50. So not a really strong claim to back it up, something that really upset his two female co-hosts. Rightly so, potentially, Donny, if you're going to make calls like that, really important you justify it. You can't just be throwing stuff out like that. It sounds as though you're a far-right Fox News presenter. Then to top it all off, recently, a tense exchange was had with Vivek Ramaswamy over race on his program, leaving his co-host completely out of the conversation and sort of alienating everyone on the platform, telling the people in his ear to stop speaking to him so he could make his point, telling this bloke that he was wrong and it's just fact, the woman next to him just having something to say but not being allowed to say it, and then an awkward transition into an ad break. I mean, he didn't seem to be the perfect way to start your day.
And I think that that's one of the lessons that we learn.
Aren't allowed to enjoy the freedoms.
I disagree with you on that, Don. I disagree with you. And I think you're doing a disservice to our country by failing to recognize the fact that we have equality before the law.
When you are in black skin and you live in this country, then you can disagree with me.
You can see why the bloody guests on the show don't want to be a part of it. He's not even giving him an opportunity to talk. He hears one thing, gets emotional, and tries to shut him down. The poor woman in the sides just sit there going, oh, holy shit, this is awkward. I thought I signed up for a beautiful conversation. She's even looking at the team in the background going, oh, guys, Donny's in a mood again. What's going on? Has he got his period? He can't have his period, can he? He had this the other day. He's such a grumpy man. But I mean, the landscape of mainstream media, cable news in general, is being shaken up. Things are clearly taking place. Are they good? Are they bad? Are we being misled? That's the question that I want to pose to you. Let me know what you think of Don. Give me a few thoughts on what you think of Tucker. Let's continue that conversation down below. Subscribe, like it if you liked it. Otherwise, I mean, you don't have to dislike it, but just be nice with your feedback. That's all I'm asking.